Hello and welcome back to Chapter 7 Notes. And so where we left off in the first lecture video was talking about adding or dropping a product line. And we looked at the incremental analysis approach where we compare the difference in contribution margin to the difference in the change in fixed costs. And so you can see we lost $300,000 in contribution margin. We only saved $260,000 in fixed costs. So basically we would have a net disadvantage of dropping the product line by $40,000 if we went ahead and dropped the product line. This is kind of like what I call the shortcut way of doing it. Let's take a quick look here about how to do it the longer way, which is where we would do some comparative income statements over here. So if we go ahead, and I'll just fill this in kind of quickly, if we keep the digital watch line, we'd keep the $500,000 in sales. If we drop it, we have zero, which means we have our loss of our $500,000 over here. I'm sorry, in terms of sales. We would lose $500,000 in sales. We have our variable expenses, variable manufacturing expenses. The prior page is given to us at 120. Zero if we drop the line, 120. We have our variable shipping, which was $5,000. Zero over here, which is our $5,000 difference, and then $75,000 in commissions. Obviously, we won't pay commissions on any digital watches if we drop it. So we have the $75,000 right over here. We have our total variable expenses of $200,000, zero. Then we have our $200,000. It gives us our contribution margin of $300,000 over here. And then it would be zero. That's like what we saw on the prior page. So that shows that loss of contribution margin of $300,000. And then we can look at our fixed expenses. So we can say our general factory overhead was $60,000. Now remember, that general factory overhead will just get shifted to another product line. So therefore, it's just going to stay around. It's going to get shifted to another line, but in total, it will stay around. So it's a zero. It's not an incremental cost. The salary of the product line manager was $90,000. If we drop the line, we don't pay them. They're gone. We're going to have to lay them off, or as they once said at the company that I worked at, and I'm not kidding, you have been deselected. Rather than fired, you are deselected. Depreciation, $50,000, and we're going to say that's a sunk cost, and it's going to stick around because it did say old equipment. The differential is zero. Product line advertising is given to us at $100,000. Doesn't make sense for to advertise for a line that no longer exists. So we have our $100,000 difference there. Rent on factory space, $70,000. We drop it, we don't pay it. So that's our difference right over there, $70,000. And then we have our G&A expenses of $30,000 right over here. And then we have is our $30,000, of course, because that will be, it's just like the general factory overhead. That $30,000 will be shifted to another line, so therefore it's not an incremental cost. That's why this is zero. We add up these, we get the $400,000 in costs. We add up these over here. These costs are the fixed costs, the cost that would still remain, even if we drop the product line, gives us $140. And then we can see our difference is $260. And we can say we can take our contribution margin minus our fixed costs, gives us that loss of $100,000 that we saw on the prior page. And we can say our contribution margin minus the costs that stick around, minus $140, and then that's the difference of $40,000. Okay? So we can look over here, and on the prior page, you could see, remember that we calculated this out at $40,000. That's the net disadvantage of dropping the line. So if you look over here, should we drop it or should we keep it? Well, if you keep it, you lose $100,000. If you drop it, you lose $140,000. So you should go ahead and keep the line because you have a net advantage from doing so of $40,000, or you have a net disadvantage of dropping the line by $40,000. So keep the line. And of course, you don't want to lose the money in perpetuity, so you would want to do some things maybe over here to improve the profitability of the line. Some of the things that I think about, you might want to target maybe getting a new manufacturer. Okay. Maybe there's something we can do with our lease right over here. Maybe what we could do is actually, a lot of people want to say they want to decrease advertising. I would say maybe you want to increase advertising with the thought that sales go up by even more than what you paid for advertising. Just depends upon how much increase in sales you get from every advertising dollar that you spend. Okay? But those are some options that I would think if I were the manager of this watch line, some of the first things that I would want to do would be looking at decreasing this, looking at increasing advertising, and maybe even, I would hate, maybe focus on shipping expenses. I'd hate to decrease commissions because that just incentivizes salespeople to sell more. But maybe I could negotiate a better lease here to decrease the $70,000. Okay. Let's look at another decision that managers frequently face, which is the make or buy decision, which is an outsourcing decision. Okay. So we look over here. One of the things about the outsourcing decision, we can see we're assuming that incremental revenues are not involved. So we're only going to look at the lower cost option. So what we're saying here with outsourcing is that if we outsource the development of this part 4A to another company, this does not affect the price for which we sell this product, part 4A. If we sell it directly, it doesn't affect the price. It does not affect the sales volume. Is that always true? Depends. It really depends. I mean, it certainly could affect sales volume if you were to do a situation where you pull jobs out of the United States and you outsource it to a lower cost country, for example. Some people may be irritated by that, and they may not want to buy from your company because they have a tradition of buying American, for example. But that's kind of like what we're assuming right in this problem, that it does not affect our revenues at all. So if that's true, we can choose the lower cost option. And of course, we're also assuming that the level of service is the same here. Okay. And the quality of the part is the same. Okay. So we're holding some things constant just in the context of this problem to go ahead and do the calculations. But I just wanted you to know that in the real world, some of these assumptions may not always be the case, and you'd have to consider them. Okay, so if we look at our company, they're presently making part 4A. It's used in one of its products. Here's our unit. This is our cost per unit. Materials cost, labor cost, variable overhead, depreciation on special equipment has no resale value, so therefore it's going to be a sunk cost. Supervisor salary, $2 per part. We can take the supervisor salary and divide it by the number of parts, and we get $2 per part. And then we have our general factory overhead, which is an allocated common cost. It's like that art department example that I talked about in the first lecture video for Chapter 7. These costs above are based on 20,000 parts produced each year, and outside suppliers offer to provide the 20,000 parts for only $25 a part. We can see over here our unit product cost is $30, and they're saying, and this outside supplier is saying, hey, look, I can give it to you for $25. So on the surface, it looks like a good deal, but are there some costs that we would still incur even if we took this $25 offer from the outside supplier? And the answer is yes. The general factory overhead, because that would just be pushed over to another product line. And depreciation of special equipment is a sunk cost, and we're going to just continue to have it because it has no resale value. We don't want to get rid of it. Okay? So now the question becomes, should we make it in-house for $30, or should we buy it from an outside supplier for $25? Remember, some of these costs that are in here, namely this and this one, will continue to go on, even if we still buy it from the outside supplier. So now we can do, when we look over here, the first thing we say is there any irrelevant costs? And of course we can say yes, that depreciation, kind of just went over this, depreciation on special equipment is irrelevant because it doesn't have a resale value, and we're going to consider that a sunk cost. The second one is general factory overhead. Okay, is also an irrelevant cost because it's just going to be redistributed to another product line. So we look over here and we can set up a table to help us answer these questions. And I'm a big fan of setting up tables to help you solve these problems. We see our outside purchase price. We're going to buy the 20,000 parts for $25 a part, which means 500,000. The $25 a part times the 20,000 parts. What's our direct materials cost? Well, if we make it in-house, right, we're going to have to make the 20,000 parts. If you look on the prior page, it was $9 a part. That gives us $180,000 right over there. And then we continue to look. Remember, we had the 20,000 parts, and our labor cost was $5 a part. Variable overhead was $1 a part, 20,000. I'm just going to put NA here because it would be the same in either situation, because I'm going to incur that depreciation on special equipment regardless. So you can include the dollar amount here and here, but I'm just going to go ahead and omit it because it does not change the analysis at all. Okay, so we look at our supervisor's salary. We get 40,000, and of course, if we buy the part from someone else, we're not going to be paying that supervisor, and we will not be making the part. So all those will be zero. Of course, we can put the purchase price at zero because we're making it. And then our general factory overhead, again, I'm just going to say NA because it would be the same. Now you can see, if you look back at that problem that we did with the bridge computer, you could see that I did include the prior production costs, and you can go ahead and include the costs here. It's just going to be the same here as it will here, the same here as it will here. So it doesn't make a difference in the difference between the total costs. So it's just not going to matter. So I'm just omitting it. Okay. So we look at the total cost of making it is $340. The total cost of buying it is $500,000. What should we do? We should make it because it has less cost. We should make it because it has less cost. Now let's look at a slight wrinkle at this. Essex Company has the opportunity to make another product with the equipment and space used to make Part 4A. This new product, call it Part 4B, has a product margin, which means it has a profit of $200,000 and does not create any additional fixed costs. Now what should we do? The first thing is, what does this $200,000 represent to Essex Company? It's an opportunity cost. Okay? It's an opportunity cost of making Part 4A. It's an opportunity cost of making Part 4A. That's exactly what it is. So if we make Part 4A, we can't make Part 4B, which gives us this profit of $200,000. And so now I'm going to come down here and go ahead and redo my table at a summary level. So I'll do my make-buy table that I did earlier, and I'll say purchase cost, remember, was our $500,000, and of course that would be zero under make. And then we can say cost to make, which we can look back up here, remember is $340. Obviously, that would be zero here if we buy it, because we're making it. And so then we say our opportunity cost to make is another cost right over here of $200,000. And then, of course, it would be zero, that we don't have an opportunity cost because if we buy it, because we go ahead and make it. So now what we can do is we can add up the total cost. And we can say the cost to making it is $540. The cost of buying it is $500,000. Now what should we do? We should go ahead and buy the part and then use that equipment and space to make Part 4B, or whatever the part is called, that gives us additional profit of $200,000. Okay? That would be the optimal scenario in this problem. Okay? So the opportunity cost right over here, that's another opportunity cost of making this Part 4A that we need to consider, and that raises the cost of making Part 4A. Now look on page 9, just kind of quickly, some potential problems and relevant cost analysis. What I want to say over here, the first one is watch out for incorrect assumptions that all variable costs are relevant and all fixed costs are irrelevant. So what we need to remember is that, and I'm sorry, it's just taking a second here to adjust. I think you can read it, so I'm just going to go ahead and read it out here because I'm running out of time. For example, the fixed cost could be relevant if a company needs needs equipment for a special order. The unit cost data can be potentially misleading in a couple different ways. If irrelevant costs are included, for example, including including fixed overhead and the unit cost is a problem. And what we can also say, remember that fixed cost per unit decline as we make more.